Man, this show is just getting better and better. X-Men 97, Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. I called what was happening last week because if there's one thing about X-Men, well, if there's one comic book group that I know the history of, it's X-Men. I am a huge fan of Chris Claremont's X-Men run. And because of that, I'm familiar with a lot of the storylines that we see in the movies and now in the X-Men animated series. So I'm familiar with stuff like the Phalanx Covenant, Asteroid M. I'm familiar with stuff like the Goblin Queen and Madeline Pryor. And that's what we got in this episode, man. This third episode. Phenomenal episode. Jean Grey centric episode. Basically, it's exactly as I said last week, and basically what it was stated in the comics. Although it's been they've taken inspiration from the comics, but the story does not go exactly like how it does in the comics. But basically, Mr. Sinister was indeed the one that was behind the creation of Madeline Pryor, the clone of Jean Grey, to have a baby with Scott Summers, which of course would be Nathan Summers, aka Cable. But he's not Cable yet. So all of that gets fleshed out here. And Sinister actually shows up at the X Mansion, which I thought was unexpected. And he kind of does his mind tricks to like mess with the X-Men. They actually showed, like, they had a lot of Easter eggs in this one too. Like they showed Forge at the very end as a teaser for the next episode. But besides that, they showed Morph with the face that he had when he was a victim of Sinister's. This is definitely not the last we've seen of Sinister, for sure. But there was an incredible sequence where the Goblin Queen, where she becomes the Goblin Queen, and they're borrowing a lot from that storyline and from Inferno. Although I will say it does feel like it was a bit rushed here. Like they tried to cram a few different months worth of stories and a lot of stuff from the past. The Inferno storyline is awesome, but it's one that is not going to get resolved in one episode. There's just too much there. And even though they took bits and pieces of it, like for example, in the Inferno storyline, the X-Men have to go up against a bunch of demons. Well, in this episode, there was that one scene where they're fighting. It was an illusion from Sinister, but they're fighting in hell. And Bishop is there, helping them out. But it was just, there were so many little Easter eggs. There was an Easter egg to the end of the Dark Phoenix when Cyclops is holding Jean, that they showed that when Jean and the Goblin Queen are going through each other's memories. They didn't quite figure out when the switch happened. And so they're not sure if Jean Grey is even married to Scott, or even if Jean is actually Phoenix. Like it may have been Madeline Pryor that was Phoenix the entire time, and that might end up being a plot for the future. But my God, there was the sequence here where Goblin Queen's using her powers to fight off the X-Men, and then she ends up fighting Jean in the astral plane. It was so well done. It had such dope anime vibes, like the smoothness of the animation, the camera movement, like you can tell that the team that made X-Men 97 really worked hard, but also, man, they are doing some of the best storylines. Because I said to myself, okay, they might do the Goblin Queen story or they might not do it. I don't know. I mean, I said, wouldn't it be cool if they did do it where it's not actually Jean Grey's son, it's the son of Madeline Pryor, and she refers to herself as that at the very end of the episode when her and Jean say goodbye. So now all the X-Men are going to have to figure out, how to proceed, because now Bishop, this episode was very sad and very, like, they have to, the fallout from this episode has to continue next week. But Cyclops having to give up his son for a better tomorrow because Bishop took baby Nathan to the future, to of course eventually become Cable. But for that to have happened, because what happened was Sinister gave him the techno-organic virus, which is what Cable has. But it's just so sad because, like, he had to say goodbye to his son, which, even though it's not Jean, Like, even though it's not Jean Grey's son, it is Jean Grey's son because Madeline Pryor is a living organism, even though she's a clone. She is a living person with feelings, thoughts, and emotions. And this was a very powerful, heart-wrenching episode. X-Men 97 is the best thing Marvel's given us in years. Maybe since, I don't know, No Way Home? Maybe since then? I don't know, but my God, this is such a great show and has made me so happy that this exists, and I'm so happy to live in a world where this actually exists, they brought back the original X-Men series, and they're doing storylines that from the Chris Claremont run. It's almost like this entire thing is a tribute to the man. But I think Mr. Claremont will go down in history as the greatest writer for X-Men ever. You know, as much as I love Stan Lee, he didn't do the things with the X-Men that Chris Claremont wound up doing for decades. I mean, 70s, 80s, and 90s. The X-Men that we know came from his mind. So it was beautiful that, you know, they were able to capture this story so well. I love this show, man. I adore this show. Anyways, what did you think about X-Men 97 Episode 3? I liked it a lot, like I said, and I cannot wait to see what else they got cooking up this season, man. 10 episodes, 7 to go. Thumbs all the way up.